Castles, whether they were the homes of royalty or lords, required a large amount of staff to complete a large amount of various jobs and duties. Even if they housed nobles and not the king, then their lifestyle was still rather lavish when compared to the commoners or the ordinary people. But what type of people worked inside a castle? Let's have a look and find out who worked in these magnificent fortifications. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Firstly, let's consider something rather interesting what used to occur during the medieval period, and in fact during the Tudor period. Kings and queens would sometimes travel around the country with their court, the court being the royal household. Now when this happened, they would be put up in some of England's best castles, and this would be hugely expensive and a lavish occasion for the castle's owner to put on. Travelling with the monarch could be hundreds of people, who all needed feeding as well as accommodating and looking after. On these sorts of occasions, you could expect there to be a lot more staff required to work in a castle than normal. However, inside a medieval castle, there were different staff required to perform different roles. Staff that worked here had certain predefined roles that they were hired for example a head chef or a cook, who had a number of staff working with him. Cooking staff were one of the most important groups of workers inside a castle, as they were responsible for the meals and the feeding of a large group of people. Sometimes inside great halls, banquets and lavish occasions would take place, so the cooking staff would need to create incredible and rich foods to a very high standard. They usually worked in large kitchens under the watchful eye of a head cook, who was in turn responsible for the buying of food items and oversaw the storage and preservation of food in the pantries of the castle. Other notable positions involved in the kitchens were the confectioner, the larder and the cellarer. Once the meals had been cooked, the food would be served by a number of butlers or footmen, who were known as service staff. Similar to restaurants today, they would deliver the food to the tables of the guests. Now sometimes the kitchens were actually inside the castle, however in some cases they were separate buildings found inside the inner bailey. This is in case of fire. It would have been safer for a fire to occur in a separate building than to take out the castle's keep, where all the guests were staying. So service staff sometimes could find themselves walking across courtyards to deliver food inside a great hall, which could also be a separate building. Now one of the most important jobs for someone to have inside a castle was to do with the defensive element of the structure. The majority of male servants who worked in a medieval castle were also military personnel who carried out other duties such as gatekeepers, knights and guards. The guards would have a key role in keeping the castle locked and safe during the evenings. They would be dispatched whenever the king required the service of soldiers during battles or whenever a rebellion was needed to be put down. Interestingly, Motte and Bailey castles were built with this in mind, so in a day, an army could leave a castle's barracks and march to put a rebellion down. Guards would also double up as defenders of the castle if they needed to, and could work on their fighting skills within the castle's walls, practicing archery and so on. So soldiers in the castle would usually do other jobs as well, such as guarding the castle grounds, performing bodyguard duties, and also ensuring that peasants comply with paying taxes, fines, and help with keeping them in order. In terms of medieval castles, staff who were at the bottom of the hierarchy were usually the cleaning staff, who were in charge of keeping the castle relatively tidy. They were usually under the command of a head maid, who would organise cleaning staff to efficiently meet the needs of the castle's owners. Maintenance would also be carried out by specific carpenters or stonemasons, who needed to make sure that everything was in order. The maintenance staff who looked after the everyday tasks would perform roles such as looking after the fireplace to keep the rooms warm, and keeping the wardrobes and the clothes of the lord and ladies in good order. The maintenance staff were usually accountable to the head maid. Also you'd have a chamberlain, who was a rather important figure, as they controlled the administration of the castle's finances, and these would work closely with the seneschal, who looked after the admin of the estate, as well as organising special events. There would also be a special part of the castle's staff, who would look after animals and horses in particular in the stables. The stable master was in charge of his staff, and also there would have been a master of hounds, who looked after the dogs, and also possibly a number of falconers. The stables would have been swept out by a groom, who also looked after the horses as well. Another prominent part of the stable staff would have been the messenger, who would convey messages to different areas using the horses. A marshal may be in overall charge of this area of the castle, and to help him could have been a number of clerks. In this area you'd probably find blacksmiths and carpenters, who could repair parts of the castle and also equipment if needed. The blacksmith would make necessities such as weaponry, armour, horseshoes, knives, agricultural tools and so on. The carpenter may make furniture for the castle such as the beds and the wardrobes. Similarly to those who were in charge of the admin side of the castle, there could have also been a steward in place to look after the castle overall. This was a man who represented the Lord, and they would be kitted out in fine and lavish robes. They were very well paid, and sometimes given their own property near to the castle. The steward would keep a close eye on the estate's accounts, as well as income from tenants, taxes and fines, which needed to be paid. But one of the most important jobs inside would have been the priest or the chaplain. Now sometimes churches or chapels could be found outside the main castle building, and sometimes they were found even inside the keep. One example being Conisbrough Castle, which has a beautiful chapel almost like we'd have an ensuite bathroom. The chaplain was a permanent member of staff who presided over the daily religious services, which would usually be in Latin. As they were usually well educated, they carried out other duties such as writing important letters for the Lord and answering his correspondence. The chaplain in large castles could also have his own clerks, who would form up a large secretarial department inside the castle. The priest would also be responsible for the personal education of the children who lived there, which was an extremely important job. Another interesting job found inside a castle was that of the entertainers. There were lots of different kinds of professional entertainers in the medieval period, such as actors, acrobats and jesters, and many of these would tour around the country making money where they could. Minstrels or jongleurs were a more permanent feature of a castle, and these entertainers would be based there, and would sing and play music as well as performing poetry and small parts of comedy as well. If there was an important occasion going on, then entertainers would be very important, as they needed to impress some very high profile guests. Hunting was also a very popular pastime of the medieval lords, and they would usually be a master huntsman. This was a very prestigious job, and these people were very skilled and were experts in their craft of hunting animals. They were also responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of the hunting gear that was used. So in conclusion, there was a very large number of staff required to keep a medieval castle running, safe and well maintained. There was also a huge number of staff required to feed the Lord, and this number would be multiplied if there was a royal visit to a fortification. It would have been an extremely busy environment to live in and be part of, and probably a very stressful one too. Even during the Victorian times and now, the monarchy and aristocracy requires a large number of staff to function and perform different duties. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thank you for watching.